And live, the governor of talk radio, Cliff Kelly, joins me as we discuss flood rains around Chicago, the presidential campaign season, the economy, and school funding. Stay tuned for a verbal tennis match with the Talk of Chicago. WVON's Cliff Kelly on Garrard McClendon Live. Welcome to Garrard McClendon Live. If you're experiencing bad weather in your neighborhood, I invite you to tell me about basement water blues or your agonizing commute to work on my blog at www.cltv.com/GML. Tonight, radio talk show host Cliff Kelly joins me with his wit and wisdom to discuss the flood rains, the presidential and vice presidential rumblings, Chicago school funding, and our terrible economy. Joining us now from the Tribune Tower is the Talk of Chicago's governor of talk radio, WVON 1690 talk show host Cliff Kelly.
Thank you,
Kelly. Kelly. How you doing, Cliff?
I'm fine. How are you, Gerard?
Oh, man, I'm doing fantastic.
Just let me say before we get started, you've been doing an excellent job. Really appreciate you.
Hey, coming from the governor of talk radio, Cliff Kelly, I appreciate that and I accept that.
Well, I'm only serious.
Hey, Cliff, you know what? We're going to talk about several things today, but
sure.
Let's first start with this weather. Now, I've got the best person to talk about this on the show because we can talk about bad rains, we can talk about floods, but there's also a political side to this story. Governor Blagojevich had a press conference earlier talking about this, but do torrential rains and flood rains, does that mean something a little bit different to poor communities and communities of color?
Well, I think that's one of the reasons I'm glad you bring up the other side of a lot of these stories that you wouldn't hear otherwise, Gerard. Yes, it does mean a lot. I think the great example of that, of course, was Katrina, when there was no problem with watching poor and African Americans just die, thousands of people, of course, homeless, and no real plan as they had this last time to get people out. But the situation here is historical, as the governor said. To have, what did he say, 99 billion?
Yeah.
90 billion gallons of rain from Thursday night to Sunday just in the Chicago area, Gerard, that's going to cause major problems. Now, as far as the county is concerned, they seem to be doing a pretty good job. There are a lot of people who have even mentioned, and you've had them on CLTV, people have mentioned the fact that they were pleased with the first responders and these individuals from the county that were coming out to help with sandbags and so forth. You heard President Stroger mentioning what they were attempting to do through the Emergency Management Agency. So it seems as though the big thing is getting out the information now that hopefully the water will recede in an expeditious manner. But the real problem now is getting help for these people. Now, when Congressman Jan Schakowsky does a great job, she did say now we have to depend on FEMA. Now, we don't want to hear, you did a good job, Brownie. We don't want to hear anything like that, if you recall what I'm talking about.
Oh, yes, sir.
Right. So, also, though, you have to get out information about, as they mentioned, don't go in your basement, Gerard, if it's flooded, because unless the power's been cut off, people can be executed. You've got to keep these kids who might want to play in the rain, in the water and so forth. It's full of bacteria. It's got all kinds of problems. So the worst is yet to come relative to the cleanup. And that's the problem.
You're absolutely right. And, you know, the fact that the governor is declaring it a disaster area, I think that's fantastic. I think that some of the lessons have been learned, but I'm still a little fearful about poor communities. You know, and please chime in on this, Cliff. It seems as if when golf course communities are flooded and with gated communities are flooded, it seems like the problem is worse. I mean, that really frustrates me when you have cities like, the south side of Chicago pounded, when you have like Munster, Griffith, Indiana, Highland pounded, Hobart pounded. It's like, it's okay. But when you start seeing those wealthy communities pounded, and over in Northwest Indiana, Munster is one of those communities, it seems like it's a bigger story now.
Well, you're absolutely right, and that's because one of the major reasons is that those people make their wishes and demands known to a much greater degree than a lot of folks do.
Yeah.
Listen, the only reason that government does anything is when people demand it, Gerard. You talk about that all the time.
Yeah.
If you get people out there who are screaming, you know, one of the greatest things, Michael Moore and his documentary on sicko, you know, about the medical problems we have.
Yes.
One of the things that someone asked him, a critic, saying, well, if things are so great, you use France as an example, why are they always having demonstrations? He said that's the reason it's great, because the politicians are afraid of the public. In the United States, the public is afraid of the politicians.
Wow.
And that's true. When they go, I got caught in a demonstration in Paris. I didn't even know what it was about, but I was running along with them, you know.
Wow.
But we don't do that to the degree that we should. However, you make that distinction, and you're right.
Yes.
The people who have money, who are wealthy, who know how to work the system, are always responded to first, because the people who are responsible for them know the only way they can keep their jobs is to do what should be done everywhere.
That's right, Cliff. Hold on tight. You know, and it seems as if the First Amendment is just reserved for wealthy people. Hey, and still to come, Cliff Kelly is in the house. The discussion continues with Mr. Kelly's views on Obama, McCain, Biden, and Palin. Can you see Russia from Chicago? Stay tuned for more Garrard McClendon Live. We'll be back shortly.
I believe that diplomacy should be the cornerstone of any foreign policy.
And I can see Russia from my house.
Oh, man. I'm telling you, I can hear Cliff Kelly laughing from Tribune Tower. Cliff Kelly joins me from Tribune Tower. Sarah Palin was the caricature of the evening last week on Saturday Night Live. What are your thoughts on the vice presidential pick, Mr. Cliff Kelly?
Gerard, I tell you, it was a shock to everybody. It was my understanding that the nominee, Senator McCain, really wanted someone else, and particularly, as I heard from a number of my Republican friends, he wanted Lieberman.
Yeah.
But he was not exciting the base, the evangelicals, the extreme right, and he had to do something to excite them.
Yeah.
And I understand he was given this person, and that was sort of obvious. He'd only met her once.
You know, Cliff, I hate to interrupt. What frustrates me about the whole McCain-Palin campaign is this. When you look at Romney, Huckabee, when you look at Giuliani, Thompson, and you look at some others, of course, Lieberman, who I call Lieberman Anakin Skywalker, because he flips parties depending on how he can get elected.
That's true.
But what's frustrating is, where in the world do they get a Sarah Palin? I mean, I thought they would have at least picked a senator, a U.S. senator. I thought that was going to happen, or at least someone that has worked their way up through the Republican construct. You know, I think this blindsided everyone, and now we actually see people accepting this, Cliff?
Well, I think it comes from this, Gerard, and I understand your point, which is people who know about politics feel the same way you do. But seemingly, he wasn't exciting anybody. Don't forget, a lot of these people did not want McCain. You had some of the right-wing talk show hosts who were totally against him, and you know, at one point he couldn't even support his campaign. The people working for him, he had to lay people off. But don't forget, his campaign manager, who by the way is a lobbyist, also he talks about lobbying and earmarks. He also said this is not about issues; it's going to be about personality. So they want to stay away from issues. They don't want to talk about. Now, Palin can't talk about issues, obviously.
Right.
You know, you can't see, as you mentioned, you can't see Russia from Chicago. But I see a lot of Eastern Europeans in my community. They're doing all kinds of work and rehabbing buildings and so forth. A lot of them can't. You know, when Pilgrim Church burned down, the guys who set the roof on fire couldn't even say help in English. They were from Eastern Europe somewhere. But she is a joke. Now, the point is...
Oh, wait a minute, Cliff. Cliff Kelly called Sarah Palin, the governor of Alaska, the vice presidential nominee, a J-O-K-E. Come on. Cliff Kelly, you got jokes, man.
I would like to say more than that, Gerard. But listen to this lady. First, she's out and out lying. There's a gentleman that I'd like you to get on the show. He's a professor. His name is Rick Schenkman. Mr. Schenkman has written a book, Just How Stupid Are We? The subtitle is Facing the Truth About American Voters. She has totally lied. Give you an example about the bridge to nowhere. She supported it.
She sure did.
But does she say that now? No. But people say, you know, that, listen, The other thing that I don't like about a lot of people who are supposed to be questioning these candidates, for instance, when Brokaw, who was sitting in, you know, for Tim Russert, who passed away, of course, had Giuliani on. Giuliani was talking about, well, Brokaw asked him about the investigation going on in the Alaska General Assembly.
That's right.
About this Troopergate. Then this guy, Giuliani, who says, no, there's nothing about that. That's the Barack people that are supporting that. That's an out-and-out lie.
It's a lie.
Now, Brokaw should have known that the legislature is Republican. It's Republicans that are backing that. And in fact, the guy who broke the tie in the committee is a Republican who, oddly enough, represents Palin's district.
Yeah, and you know what we're seeing too, Cliff, is, and you kind of bring up the fact that we're seeing some irresponsible journalism too, because the follow-up questions are never said. You know, and everyone's jumping on Charles Gibson for treating Sarah Palin in an unfavorable way. He was just asking questions.
He should have done more than that.
Absolutely.
You would have.
Oh, most definitely.
I know you would have,
you know,
and so would I.
Hey, and you know, I mean, Tina Fey said it best. I mean, just being able to see Russia from Alaska is not a prerequisite for being vice president.
Listen, it says she also lied when she said she was in Iraq. When she went to and she didn't even have a passport before she was going to visit the Alaska National Guardsmen.
Man.
And it was in Kuwait, they said. The colonel that was with them said, no, we were in Kuwait. We weren't in Iraq. But when I asked her, Charlie said, well, where have you been before then? Oh, I went to Mexico and Canada.
Oh, Cliff, I couldn't believe that, Cliff. You know what was deep about that was, I'm like, you know, those are both conjoined to the United States.
That's right.
They're both
That's
in
right.
North America.
They're contiguous.
Hey, Cliff, hold tight right there, all
Okay,
right?
sure.
Keep it right there as we try to move forward in this topic on Garrard McClendon Live. I got the governor of talk radio, Cliff Kelly, in the house. From the Tribune Tower is Cliff Kelly from WVON 1690, the talk of Chicago. Cliff, let's move to school funding. What's your take on CPS and suburban funding? A few weeks ago, we had the Blagojevich, Reverend Meeks wars. You know, Chicago gets 10K, some of the suburbs get 17K. What kind of mix do you give all of that?
Well, and I saw your show on that. What needs to be done, obviously, Gerard, is there needs to be equal funding. Now, the problem is the Illinois Constitution in Article 10 is the education article, and it states that the state has the primary responsibility for the funding of a free public education.
Right.
I was a delegate to the convention, and therefore I know what it means. You can't tell, as you know, what a law means simply by reading it. You have to know what the legislative intent was.
Right.
Nick Blaze, who was the mayor of Arlington Heights, sued the State Board of Education saying, well, in reading that, it means at least 50%. Well, the state Supreme Court did the right thing. They went to the transcript from the convention. Doesn't mean that at all, Gerard. It's not a goal. It's not a mandate, rather. It's a goal. In fact, we get less now than we did when we passed the convention, the Constitution, in 1970. The problem is that needs to be changed. It can be amended so that the state we're 48th or 49th, depending upon whom you ask.
That's right.
About how much we contribute to public schools. Now, you know, you talk about money doesn't matter. Money does matter when you're talking about books. Well, we got schools that don't even have books.
Yes.
When you're talking about modern technology today, obviously it makes a difference. Now, there are a number of people. Dawn Clark Netsch, when she ran for governor, she had an exchange there, increase the income tax, and we have one of the lowest, Gerard, and reduce the property tax.
There we go.
The reason that we have these distinctions is because communities that are wealthy and have a higher property tax obviously have more to give to the schools. We've got to get past that, and we're getting worse.
You know, Cliff, when you have more money in a school corporation as well, you can pay more money to highly qualified teachers.
Exactly.
I mean, the fact that New Trier District can pay $84,000, you know, the average per high school teacher, I mean, that's pretty intense. It's not that you're paying them that much more money. You can make your qualifications a little bit more aggressive and competitive to get the best teacher. Let me tell you a beef that I have, though, Cliff, big pet peeve of mine is when you have teachers in a school corporation that know less than the students. I've been in classrooms, Cliff, where the students know more about the computers than the teachers. I'm like, what kind of teacher education programs are these quote-unquote teachers going through? Another problem I have too, Cliff, is this. Cliff, you speak the King's English. I try to speak the King's English. Sometimes I'll break it up. But Cliff, when certified school teachers do not use standard English throughout the school day, I've got a big problem with that.
I don't have a problem with you at all on that. In fact, rather than coming up with what we heard from CPS recently, Gerard, about giving students money for good grades, I would rather, and this goes along with your philosophy, I would rather give it to teachers who are showing that they are teaching their children and they're getting good grades.
Yes.
I think that's a better incentive. I don't think you should have to. Students should come to school to learn. I'm not sure paying them is a good idea. That's still up in the air, obviously. It's only for 10 schools. But I agree with you. We've got teachers, I know some of them, that some know, they just don't care. They get into the system and they don't care anymore.
They don't care, Cliff.
Right.
That frustrates me. You don't care. It's like, well, you know, they ain't gonna learn nothing no way, so I ain't gonna speak good English. You know, come on. Cliff, stay with me, Cliff. Keep it right there as we try to hang on to preserve our bank accounts. The governor of Talk Radio, Cliff Kelly, talks about gas prices, mortgage crisis, and our bad economy. Stay tuned. CLTV.com. Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, gas prices, mortgages. It's out of control, man. What is going on in the United States?
I don't know whether you are familiar with the movie Wall Street. Remember?
Yes.
Gordon Gekko?
Gordon Gekko, Michael Douglas.
Greed is good. That's And that's what's happening here. And the people who are really greedy and have ripped everybody off, look at the CEOs of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Look what their bailout is. It's unbelievable. Money, Gerard, that some folks don't make in an entire lifetime. But because they have blown everything, they've gotten some people very wealthy. But the folks out there who are really hurting, of course, are all of these people who are involved in these foreclosures. And now we're even getting past the subprime. And the worst is yet to come. That's the problem. A lot of the ones that are readjusting, but not only that, because of the unbelievable economic situation we've got, Gerard, we've got the highest unemployment rate we've had in, what, 6 years? People are not just unable to pay their mortgages. So you've got that, in addition to the fact, when you look at how many billions of dollars we are spending on this war, and, you know, that's something that still needs to be talked about relative to the presidency, because, you know, the economy is all tied into that.
It's like fiscal irresponsibility at its highest level.
That's right.
You know, you look at a Bill Clinton bringing in 20 million jobs. You look at George Bush losing 5 million jobs. You know, and then we don't want to blame the president or the Republican Party. They still have the responsibility of creating a climate of quality economics. You know,
Gerard, that's the reason why the McCain people said, stop the experience business. Get off of experience. You know what he's saying?
What's
change. He's saying change. Who said change first?
I think it was Obama.
That's right. He's been doing it for 19 months. But now you've got this guy, you know, I said a great theme for his campaign would be No Country for Old Men. But, you know, here this guy is trying to pretend he's something that he's not. I mean, you know, I don't know whether you saw Sidney McCain on The View. In fact, The View, the ladies on The View kicked both of them in the butt.
I saw it.
They asked her, how many homes do you have? She said, that's not a campaign issue.
We can't talk about that right now.
Never answered the question. The Keating Five, she got money from Keating. You know, we can go all... You need to really go into this stuff, and if the media doesn't do it, then they're not doing the job that the First Amendment
You know, Cliff,
meant.
though, let's be honest, Cliff. I've got very little time left, but you got to give me a quick, short statement. Is Obama ready, though? Come on, he's wet behind his ears. He's a little green. Everybody thinks he's cute. He's ready. Is he really ready?
I think he's ready, and I'll tell you why. He's certainly as ready as Bush was, because Bush didn't know anything. I think he's ready because he would surround himself with good people. And I do believe that he is talking about change. I have the honor of knowing the man personally, and I know how intelligent. And the other thing I love about him, which you don't see too often in a politician, Gerard, He listens.
Yes.
You can tell he listens. You know, you can tell when you're talking to some people, I know you know this, they're not listening to you. They're waiting until you stop talking.
Uh-oh.
So I know he can do that. So
That's
yeah,
right.
I think he is ready.
Hey, Cliff, where can we find you as we close the show?
I am on 1690 AM, and we stream live, of course, at www.wvon.com. And I'm on from 3 to 7 p.m. Monday through Friday. And that's why I love you having your show replayed so I can catch it in the evening.
Hey, I appreciate that. That's Cliff Kelly, the governor of Talk Radio. Thanks a lot, Cliff.
You're great.
Hey, if your computer didn't get wet, send me your flood stories at cltv.com/GML. Thanks to our guest, Cliff Kelly, talk show host on The Talk of Chicago, WVON 1690. As we wet vac our homes, get the sump pump out and dehumidify our homes, let's not lose sight of what's more important, human life. Things can be replaced and basements can be cleaned, but our lives are far more important than our possessions. Give your family a hug tonight and be grateful for what you have. That's GML for tonight. Keep your head up and always be encouraged. Good night.
Ask or ask? Donda's rules suit shoes.